Introducing the remarkable archetype, the dangerous gentleman. With a demeanor that commands respect and a hint of potency, he embodies strength tempered by virtue. Though his capabilities could veer towards danger, he channels his power for noble causes, serving others and safeguarding those in need. Rooted in a profound love for both God and humanity, he navigates life with discipline and purpose. In his presence, one witnesses the harmonious blend of power and benevolence, a testament to the true essence of masculinity. Step into the world of the dangerous gentleman, where strength is wielded for righteousness, and discover a captivating embodiment of honor and valor. Greetings and welcome to the Dangerous Gentleman podcast. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly did earn it. The truth at all costs. What does that mean? Well, there's a whole other piece to that phrase that a lot of people miss. It starts off with peace if possible, truth at all costs. And it was actually stated first by a man named Martin Luther. You may not know who Martin Luther is, but just for a quick education, Martin Luther was a Catholic monk in the 1500s. And so he saw indulgences and hypocrisy growing in the Catholic Church. He stood up against the Catholic Church, and he stood up against the hierarchy, and he stood up against a lot of the things that they stood for, which was the Catholic Church believed that the Bible should be read and interpreted only by the smartest people, by bishops, priests, monks. So it was literally chained to the pulpit in the churches, and it was written in Latin so that most people couldn't understand it. They wanted to keep the power for themselves, and Martin Luther didn't like this. There were a lot of other things that Martin Luther stood up against, but on October 31st, 1517, he nailed what's called the 95 Theses on the door of a church in Wittenberg, Germany, to this day known as the 95 Theses. And it's what started, in a very significant way, it's what started the Protestant Reformation, which moved us away from a centralized church in the Catholic Church and led to what we now consider to be like the way the church is done. Yes, the Catholic Church still exists, but most people go to what are called, Protestant churches. And at the time of Martin Luther, pretty much every single government in the world was a monarchy, some kind of top-down rule. Kings and queens and princes and princesses and dukes and lords and ladies and all of these different things. There was a very top-down authority structure, both governmentally and civilly, and in the church. And so this 95 Theses challenged all of that. People got very angry at Martin Luther. He was not a real popular guy. He fled all over. He had escaped persecution. He was imprisoned. All of these different things because of his stance to fight against the Catholic Church. And you could literally say that our world would not be what it is without Martin Luther and men who came behind him standing up for what they believed in. In a very real way, he changed the world. And so this phrase, peace if possible, the truth at all costs, is a big part of what drove him, right? He didn't want to cause revolutions all over Europe. He didn't want to cause revolutions within the Catholic Church even. He wanted to just fix the Catholic Church. He didn't want to blow it up. But the reality is that he knew what he needed to say. He knew what the truth was after reading the Bible, and he knew that the truth is what was needed to be said. And so peace if possible, he tried to change it from within. History is full of people who try to change whatever institution from within, but in the end, they had to speak the truth. In the end, they had to make a stand because the truth was the most important. Now, today, just to be truthful myself, I've been struggling with some things in my head and just some attitudes and behaviors lately that it makes me feel disqualified, right? So I feel a little disqualified to speak this, but it's the truth, and so I really feel like I need to say it. I was having a conversation with my pastor this morning because I kind of came to this, like, I've known this phrase, peace if possible, truth at all costs, for a long time, but it's really been coming to the forefront of my mind a lot more over the last couple of weeks. And I've really come to the place where I'm going to speak the truth. And so I was talking to my pastor about that this morning, and he kind of brought some clarity to it. He has a tendency to do that for me because without some balance, I can get pretty radical. And I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I just kind of decided that it's time to really just to speak the truth. People need to know the truth, and people are seeking the truth. Right now, that's one of the big things is that concept of returning to orthodoxy that I've talked about on a couple different occasions. People want truth right now. People are looking for a foundation. People are looking for some absolute truth. People are also looking for peace. And so there's this balance that you got to walk between peace if possible and truth at all costs. For me, like, I'm not looking to pick fights with people. I'm not looking to cause dust ups online or in person or at church or whatever, but it's time for me to start saying what I believe. And yes, I can say that in a couple of different ways. I can say it like just get up in somebody's face about it. And sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not the right time. Sometimes it's not the right place. Sometimes it's not the right person. Because there's people in the world right now that regardless of how you say what you say, you could say it in the kindest, gentlest way. You could give them all the logic. You can give them all the facts. You can back it up with scripture, and you can make the most compelling argument ever. And they're not going to change their mind. They are very set in their ways. I have at times been very set in my ways. And I have had some pretty convincing arguments over the years that have mellowed me out, brought some balance to my life. And I've come to the place where I really feel like I am standing with my feet firmly planted on a solid foundation. And there's a little wiggle room, but for the most part, I know what I believe and I know why I believe it. And it's very powerful. It brings me peace, right? So that's where my peace is possible, is when I know the truth. If I don't have the truth, then to me, the way that I see life and the way that I look at culture and society without some absolute truth, there is no absolute peace possible. And that absolute truth for me comes from the Word of God and from my relationship with God. But there are people who don't look at it that way. There are people who just feel a certain way and they talk about that God is this way or that Jesus is this way. And they say those things based on how they feel. But if you look at the truth, if you read the Bible and you learn and realize who God really is, there is an absolute truth to that. God is unchanging. God is who he says he is in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And that's the truth. And we have to speak that truth. We have to balance it with love. But if we're speaking more, and I'm talking about that sometimes love is telling someone that they're wrong. Sometimes love is coming alongside them and supporting them in whatever way possible. But sometimes it is about pointing out the sin in their life. And sometimes it is about saying the hard things or doing the hard things or saying no. So sometimes peace isn't possible. There's a saying in recovery that if a drug addict is mad at you, you're probably doing the right thing. And if a drug addict is happy with you, you're probably enabling him. So the peace in that situation is doing whatever it is that they ask you, asking you for money. If they're asking you for drugs and you give that to them, that's going to bring peace. But it's not the truth that they really need. And you have to speak that truth, which is sometimes no. Sometimes that's no. And yes, peace is possible. But sometimes the truth has to weigh out over that. So we have to know what is ultimately most important to us. And if that's, we have to know what drives us, right? And if we switch that phrase around and we say, truth if possible, peace at all costs, that gets us into big trouble. I grew up in a house. My mom is a conflict avoider. My brother is a conflict avoider, and for most of my life, I avoided conflict. I avoided it like the plague, right? I didn't want any situation that was uncomfortable. And if I could get away with not addressing something in somebody else, or if I could just skate by and doing enough for me that no one ever said anything to me, if I could avoid conflict and keep the peace, that was the most important thing for me. As long as no one was looking at me, as long as no one's calling me out on my stuff. But the second I tried to step in any situation, anytime anyone spoke real truth to me and it brought some discomfort, it brought a lack of peace to my life, that was very uncomfortable. I didn't like it, and I would avoid it, and I would run away, and I would hide, and I would lie, and I would, just cheat my way through whatever situation that was. And it got me into trouble over and over and over again. It's a big reason why I ended up divorced. It's a big reason why I ended up losing my kids, because I didn't want to challenge people. I didn't want to challenge other people because I didn't want anyone to be mad at me, and I didn't want anyone to be uncomfortable around me. But the cost of that was that the truth was sacrificed at the altar of peace. And that can't happen. That can't happen. When peace is foremost, the truth gets sacrificed. It happens on a personal level. It happens on a societal level and on a cultural level, right? Because right now, no one wants to challenge anybody. Like, there's this whole avoidance of anything like that as a society. And yeah, people are brave online. Yeah, they'll say anything to you in a Facebook comment. But if they were ever to actually say that to you, to your face, if they had that opportunity, they never would. They would never say it. What happened to the days when men used to get in each other's faces in public and they'd go get in a fist fight in the back behind the bar or wherever it was? They'd finish up, they'd get their aggression out, they'd solve whatever situation it was. Somebody won, somebody lost, and then they'd go inside and they'd drink a beer and they'd be friends again, right? Because one of those guys called one of the other guys out. One of the guys spoke truth, and they were both willing to make a stand for it, and the world was a better place. Yeah, some people are like, avoid violence all the time, but like sometimes violence will get you somewhere, appropriately applied. And so, like, we need to get back to some of those days, right? People used to talk about politics and religion at the dinner table. And now, for decades, it's always been like, hey, we can talk about anything at the dinner table, just don't bring up religion or politics. We should be able to talk about religion and politics. We should be able to have disagreements. We should be able to speak truth. We should be able to speak absolute principles and be able to have a civil discussion without it leading to conflict. But if it does, sometimes that's okay. So peace when we can, but the truth no matter what. When the truth is the foundation, peace will eventually follow. It might not follow right away. It might have to take a few conflicts. It might have to take a few bloody noses. It might have to take some hurt feelings. But eventually, truth will win the day. And truth, properly applied, will bring peace. Bloody noses, hurt feelings, that might be part of it. But it's got to be the most important thing. We live in a culture and a society of appeasement, where peace is the order of the day. And truth is whatever the individual interprets it as. There's no absolute standard for truth. So your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. We've forgotten the fact that there is a truth. And so instead of being able to speak that absolute truth, we'll just capitulate, at least in public, at least on the outside. On the outside, we'll say, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right, I agree. On the inside, we're seething. On the inside, we know where that leads. On the inside, we know that's not okay. But because we don't want to rock the boat, we'll just agree to the truth on the outside, and then we'll go home and we'll get angry, and we'll live in this place where our external words and our external actions don't line up with how we really feel. And people are afraid of that. And that's no way to live as an individual. That's no way to live as a society. That's no way to live as a country or a state or a family. That's no way to live in harmony with other people, with unspoken truth and having to hide that. We shouldn't have to hide. We should be able to be in the open. We should be able to speak the truth, and maybe it'll offend people. And we have to be okay with both occasionally being offended ourselves and with offending other people. And that's what makes the truth so compelling. The truth is priceless and should never be sacrificed on the altar of peace. And the price of peace can never be at the sacrifice of truth. So don't be afraid to have the hard conversations. Don't be afraid to speak the truth. Just remember that it might cost you something. It might cost you a little conflict. It might cost you a friendship. It might cost you a little sleep. It might cost your reputation a little bit. It might cost you a lot of things, but that cost is worth it for the truth. So speak it out, especially over the course of these next few months. Speak the truth. There's a lot of people out there trying to preach unity. There's a lot of people who are trying to get everyone to agree, trying to get everyone on the same page. Well, the truth is that's probably not possible. What is possible is that the truth must be spoken. Make sure that when you do speak the truth, that you are prepared to back yourself up and that you are speaking the truth. A bunch of conjecture, a bunch of guesses, a bunch of accusations, that stuff is not helpful. When you're ready to speak the truth, make sure you understand it. Make sure you've studied it. Make sure that you know it so that you're prepared for the arguments that will come against you. But don't be afraid to speak it. Just be prepared before you speak it and be prepared after you speak it. In the end, the truth will win. We can rest assured of that. The Bible tells us that the truth wins. And there may be some times of turmoil in between now and then, but we know in the end that the truth will triumph. As for me, I plan on speaking the truth more than I ever have in my life before. I plan on not hiding. I know where I stand. I know what I'm all about, and I'm willing to pay that cost. I'm willing to pay that price. And if I lose a little piece, that's okay. That's a price I'm willing to pay. And I hope you are too. So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.